ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
We off?
30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes!
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
So the informal chat is normally we ask you where you are. Alexandra's answer last time was exemplary and will be the same. So that's
maybe we can move on to something else instead. We need to come up with some new material.
You need new material. Yeah, you're right. Where aren't you calling from, Alexandra? You're not in France.
You're not in
Where are
Polignano.
you?
I'm
not in France. And I'm not in Polignano. I'm in Chelsea on the River Thames on my houseboat called Veronica. And people often think that Veronica is Alexandra and Alexandra is Veronica. It's quite confusing.
Veronica?
Yeah.
What is the source of the name?
I don't know. You know, boats, you don't change their names. It's very unlucky.
Yeah.
It was just called Veronica. So
I
we
like
call it Veronica.
I
And
like to think it's
I like names
Veronica
that
Lake.
end in A. Yeah.
Thank you. It's very generous of you, Alexandra. I think this is going to be a good episode. Thank you. Simon, where are you?
I am in a little flat in a little village in West Oxfordshire.
Are you getting out and about now, Simon?
Well, I never really got out and about before the pandemic, but I am doing a little bit of it now. I did go to the Cheltenham Literary Festival yesterday. That was rather lovely.
Oh, that was exciting. To see,
Yes.
Who did you see?
I went because my friend Karina Licorice Quinn was speaking about her new book, The Dust Never Settles, which she was on a panel of people talking about magical realism, a genre about which I know almost nothing, but now know a little bit more.
I'm not even going to say anything about magical realism, such as my
aversion,
hatred of it. Yes, that's bad, isn't it? That's bad. I went to a literary festival last week, and I had an absolute whale of a time. As anyone who follows me on Twitter will know, God, I have fun. It was it was great. I interviewed Hayley Mills and Steve Van Zandt from the East Street Band.
Just the best.
I met Hayley Mills 2 years ago at Gifford Circus, and I was nearly fainted with excitement.
Yeah.
Because obviously she was my heroine when I was a young woman. It was amazing to meet her. How exciting.
I have very similar feelings, Alexandra.
Me too. In fact, I think my feelings are somewhat more suspect.
Yes, I think yours are.
Yours, I don't want to know yours, John. But of course, The Parent Trap leads into the book that we're talking about because, identical twins.
Yeah.
Indeed,
Yes.
it does.
But I had the most exciting week last week
course.
because an author of mine won the Nobel Prize.
Hang on. No, that's coming up in the intro.
You're not getting away that easily.
Straight away.
We're not wasting.
Yeah, you're not. You tried to just, as though that were the lightest thing.
I mean, there is nothing. There is no trophy, not now that you don't have on your shelf. It's unbelievable. What amazing. We'll talk about it later.
Right.
Let's crack on, shall we? Okay, it's me. Hello and welcome to Backlisted, the podcast that gives new life to old books. Today, you find us driving across the sun-baked plains of Southern California, heading towards the Sierra. It's late June in the early 60s, and we're on our way to a wedding. The top is down on the Riley as we speed through the dark green fields of alfalfa. Our sense of foreboding grows. I'm John Mitchinson, the publisher of Unbound, the platform where readers crowdfund books they really want to read.
And I'm Andy Miller, author of The Year of Reading Dangerously. And we're joined today by two guests. one new, Simon Thomas, and one returning, Alexandra Pringle. Hey! Welcome to both of you. Simon Thomas co-hosts the Tea or Books podcast. Tea or Books, where he and Rachel debate the difficult decisions of reading and books, from whether to read one book at a time or many, to whether they'd keep Austen or Wolfe if they could only have one. What did you decide when you had that debate?
Well, that was maybe the hardest decision we've done, and I did keep Austen in the end, with the belief that you can read Austen in any mood, whereas Wolfe, if you're looking for something light just before bed, probably not.
Let me turn to you, Alexandra Pringle. Austen or Wolfe?
Austen. Yeah. For the laughs, you've got to have laughs.
Yeah.
You have to have the laughs.
Well, we've managed to get at least 30 seconds out of that debate. I mean, the Tea or Books do this much better than we do. He is series consultant. Simon's series consultant for the British Library Women Writers series, brilliant series, which reprints neglected books by and about women from the early to mid-20th century, including lesser-known titles by E.M. Delafield, Rose Macaulay, and Elizabeth von Arnim, as well as almost totally forgotten authors like Winifred Boggs and Dorothy Evelyn Smith. I've read two of your books, Simon, and they are My Husband Simon by Molly Panter Downs, which I absolutely loved.
Brilliant.
And Tea is So
Intoxicating.
And who was that?
Mary Essex.
Yes, that's right. And she wrote about 200 books, didn't she?
500, I think.
Oh, forgive
me. Yes, you're shortchanging her.
I really am.
Yes, Ursula Bloom was her real name, and Mary Essex, one of her many pseudonyms.
That book was not at all what I expected it to be. I thought it was going to be ever so nice, and it wasn't. It was really nasty in an enjoyable way. Village life, in fact, Simon and John. It's sort of about the backstabbing ways of village life, isn't it?
And very little has changed, absolutely. Yes, it's frothy and lovely at the same time as being venomous.
Yeah.
And grudges held for years.
So I recommend that. And also, very excitingly, next month, you are republishing a great favourite of many people who listen to this podcast, and I reckon Alexandra's as well, which is...
A Pin to See the Peep Show by F. Tennyson Jesse.
Yes, one of the Viragos from the old days.
Exactly, yes, about the Thompson Bywaters murder case.
Made into a very, very good TV drama, I think, with Francesca Annis playing... the young Francesca Annis playing Edith Thompson.
Simon, do we know why that hasn't been available for a while? Was it just lying fallow until you made inquiries?
Well, as far as I know, it was a very complicated rights issue that luckily I don't have to deal with at all. I can just say, this is a wonderful book. Wouldn't it be lovely if we reprinted it? And someone very clever went and sorted it out.
Is this person available for hire?
Well, anyway, that series is lovely. And if people who listen to this podcast aren't aware of it, they should definitely go and explore the you're up to about 13 or 14 titles now, aren't you, I think?
Yes, I think that's about right.
Brilliant.
And one that's just, I want to mention the Winifred Boggs, if I may, just because I think it's seldom has an author had such an unprepossessing name, such a wonderful book, Sally on the Rocks, from the 1910s. And it's this wonderfully proto-feminist book about a love triangle that doesn't go at all how you'd expect. So heartily recommend that one. And she completely disappeared.
I must definitely read that one. But what is your favourite of all the ones you've done?
Ooh, I think it probably is Oh, the Brave Music by Dorothy Evelyn Smith, which is written in the 40s and set before the First World War and after 1900, never exactly clear when. And it's sort of, I would describe as a meeting point of I Captured the Castle and Jane Eyre. It's one of those books that fully takes you into that, envelops you in that world. It's largely set on the Yorkshire moors, this young girl growing from, I think it's 7 to 18, and just a wonderful, wonderful book.
Listeners will be wondering why it's taken us 150 episodes to get Simon on here. I'm actually resigning and he's taking over. Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
I was just wondering, would it have been helpful, Alexandra, back in the day to have had Simon kind of as a resource? It would have been amazing, wouldn't it?
Definitely. I don't know how we lived without him.
Well, fortunately, to follow that, Alexandra Pringle joined us on Backlisted last year for episode 113, 112A, to discuss The Constant Nymph by Margaret Kennedy. The Controversial Constant Nymph by Margaret Kennedy. But we picked our way through it, didn't we? It was one of our favourite episodes last year. It was great fun. It was
amazing.
She is Bloomsbury's executive publisher, having been editor-in-chief there for more than 20 years. She joined Virago Press in 1978, where she edited the Virago Modern Classics series, becoming editorial director in 1984. In 1990, she moved to Hamish Hamilton as editorial director, and 4 years later left publishing to become a literary agent, joining Bloomsbury again in 1999. Her list of authors includes, good heavens, Margaret Atwood, Richard Ford, Esther Freud, Elizabeth Gilbert, Sheila Hancock, Khaled Hosseini, Celia Imrie, George Saunders, Camilla Shamsi, Patti Smith, Kate Summerscale, and just last week, Alexandra won the Nobel Prize for Literature via her proxy, Abdul Razak Gurna.
Just the most incredible.
Where were you when you found out he had won?
I was on the boat. I was in a meeting, and my phone was going crazy, and then these emails popped up, and I can't remember which email I read, and then I just literally nearly fainted. It was the greatest shock of my entire professional life. It was the most unexpected thing that has ever happened to me. And particularly, I have to say, because I was getting to the point after publishing Abdulrazak Gurna for 20 years and loving his work and feeling that he was one of the most important living writers, certainly the most important living African writer, that although he's always got wonderful reviews and, people do know about him, but in the larger world, he was completely ignored. And last year, I was absolutely sure that he would get on the Booker long list at the very, very least, because what he writes about, what he's always written about, which is displacement of people through politics and world events and so forth, and how he writes about it, and the fact that he's such a beautiful writer. Last year, with the ever-growing refugee crisis, and then with Black Lives Matter, I thought, at last, this is going to be his year. It's going to happen. And guess what? He didn't make the long list, and he didn't make the Costa list either. And he made the long list of the Walter Scott Prize, nice, and the short list of the Orwell Prize, and that was that. And then, literally the week before, 10 days ago or something, there was a piece in The Guardian about reinventing the canon of Black writing, and people like Bernardine Evaristo and Bernard Cree chose, who they thought were important Black writers. And guess what? No one mentioned Abdulrazak. And it was a very, very low moment for me. And I did feel the nearest I've ever felt to despair. And I'm not much given to despair. I'm insanely optimistic as a human being. You have to be if you're a publisher. And I tweeted about that. And then literally 4 days later, he won the biggest bloody prize there is. It's like...
Could you, this seems obvious to us, but could you just tell listeners, pretend that, they probably don't know, because they won't necessarily know what it means in terms of publishing his work into the UK market?
I think it's much more important in terms of the international market than the UK market, although in the case of Abdulrazak, it's incredibly important for the UK, but not necessarily for other Nobel winners, because as we know, we are a pretty insular nation here, and we don't, on the whole, read much in the way of translated work. We're not very outward looking. And so the Nobel Prize will increase sales in America and every country in the world, and it doesn't necessarily touch that much in the UK. But in the case of Abdulrazak, not only, of course, is he here and has been here since the 1960s, but he writes these beautiful stories, and they're books that anyone can read.
Amazing.
And they are about things that we need to think about at the moment. So I absolutely know that nothing will ever be the same for him again in Britain as well as around the world.
Fantastic. Anyway, let me finish this introduction, and then because we got to crack on. Yeah. Alexandra is a patron of Index on Censorship, a trustee of Gifford's Circus and the charity Reprieve, and an honorary fellow of the Royal Society of Literature.
The book that Alexandra and Simon have chosen to discuss with us today is Cassandra at the Wedding by Dorothy Baker, first published in 1962 by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt in the US and Victor Gollancz in the UK, reissued in the US in 2004 by the New York Review of Books Classics list, and in 2018 by Daunt's Books. Those two lists, obviously, pillars of contemporary backlist taste and discernment. So, Cassandra and the Wedding was Dorothy Baker's fourth and final novel. She's best known for a 1938 jazz tale, Young Man with a Horn, which was made into a movie, more of that later, and her lesbian-tinged romance trio. But Cassandra at the Wedding is Dorothy Baker's masterpiece. It's a dark family comedy based around the imminent marriage of Judith Edwards, a 24-year-old Californian musician, to John Thomas Finch, a recently qualified doctor from Connecticut. They plan to marry at Judith's family Californian ranch, but her troubled and troublesome twin sister, Cassandra, hurtling home from the flat they once shared together in Berkeley, has other ideas. In Baker's careful uncovering of the layers of family life, we find that both sisters are still in the throes of grief for their mother Jane, a mercurial writer who died of cancer 3 years earlier. Despite the valiant attempts of their brandy-soaked father, a philosopher who has exiled himself from academic life, and their waspish but devoted grandmother, the family tensions come to a head. As an early fan of the book, Carson McCullers observes, it is the exquisite pyrotechnics of Baker's prose that lift a domestic drama to the status of a literary classic. But before we plunge into the shark-infested pool of family politics, let me pose the old question. Andy, what have you been reading this week?
Well, I've been reading a book by Michael Bracewell called Souvenir, London, 1979 to 1986. And it's an account of London in the period after punk, but before the rise of digital technology. It's non-fiction. It's quite hard to categorise. And so I would say there's elements of geography, style writing, music writing, but fiction as well. Bracewell is a novelist, though he hasn't published a novel for 20 years. The last novel he wrote is a fantastic little book called Perfect Tense, about an office worker in the city of London, which I think was published by Cape, which I strongly recommend if people don't know that book. He also wrote a non-fiction book called England Is Mine, which is terrific. Book about Roxy Music called Remake Remodel. And he mostly works now as an art critic. I really love his writing. He hasn't published a new book for quite a long time. So I was really excited when Souvenir came out. And what I like about it is, I'm going to read you from the beginning of the book. It starts off as one kind of book, and then as it goes on, it becomes like, it's very hard to describe, but it's almost like it dissolves into something more impressionistic or something more abstract. So it starts with specifics, pop culture specifics, as you'll hear, but then it becomes like it's almost like an early 80s video. It's like a John Fox video, or it's like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. That things you think you remember begin to blur a bit and fade. And it moves from being descriptive to impressionistic. And when I was reading it, I was thinking, in the words of Eric Morecambe, well, this is fine, but it won't sell many ice creams going at that speed. And I genuinely thought, who is going to buy this? This is wonderful, but who's going to buy it? I'm really pleased. I heard yesterday that they've reprinted that. It looks like they're going into another printing after this one, that it seems to have caught something, and it's caught people's imaginations because guess what? The thing that sells books is selling this, which is word of mouth. So this came out, by the time you hear this, a couple of months ago, but people are talking about it and reading it and being intrigued by it and maybe a bit perplexed, but in a good way. So I'm just going to read you the beginning, and I can't help thinking that many of us gathered here today will prickle with recognition at some of this. So anyway, Souvenir, Michael Bracewell, Chapter 1, Movement. After the freezing winter of 1981, with its hard frosts and clear, icy twilights of intense stillness, and quiet, skinny boys hunched in old raincoats, always having to walk, listening to New Order, reading John Wyndham and J.G. Ballard, and pale art school girls in the thrall of Sheila Urte and David Sylvian, there occurred in the pop-style zeitgeist a role-playing fantasy. This took the following form and proved a sharp contrast. A received idea of London's West End during the mid-20th century, mixing a concentrate of bebop to beat boom modes from the late 40s to the early 1960s. This reminds me of your friend Chris, John, from Blue Rondo a la Turk. And making a dressing-up box of their glamour, zoot suits, pinstripes and keychains, Al McCogan, Spivs, Julie London, Old Compton Street, Espresso Bongo and the talk of the town, a streetwise, fast-talking, cool proletarian notion of Jewish tailors, Bakelite, Beat Girl, pomade, strippers, D-mob and D-mop, coffee bars, beehives, impresarios, modern jazz, taffeta nightclub, Stephen Ward, rockabilly stout, diamante and upright bass. This fantasy building in exuberance over 2 or 3 years to embrace samba, salsa, disco, tinsel, cocktail bar, palm trees, tans and tennis shorts, good times, party, carnival, showbiz, the sound of a bright new Britain. Occurring alongside this period costume drama of pre-swinging London, pre-Beatle pop, meanwhile, to pursue an independent but occasionally overlapping course was a cult of the abject, industrial, occult, transgressive, clever, days in a tower block east of Old Street, nights in heaven or the final Academy counter-fantasy, which seemed the shadow side, confrontational, smug, oppressive, highly wrought of all that jazz, samba, good times, showbiz shit. The shadow side knelt at the altar of Burroughs, De Boer, Pasolini and Bataille. The samba side, rather to Bernard Delfont.
That sounds brilliant.
If you like that, it's a kind of high wire act for the whole book. I thought it was wonderful. So that's Souvenir by Michael Bracewell, and that's published by White Rabbit. John, what have you been reading?
I've been reading Pure Indulgence this week, but I picked it up. It's sent to me by Nat Jantz of Sort Of Books, who has done an amazing job bringing all of Tove Jansson's work into print. And this is Notes from an Island by Tove and Tuulikki Pietila, known as Tutti. They live together as partners. And this is the account of their life on each summer they would go. 26 summers they spent on this tiny little rocky island called Klovharon in the Gulf of Finland, and they built a house there. And in the end, they became too old. In 1991, they were too old to stay there, and they left in their late 70s. But it's as well as Tove Jansson's wonderful prose, there are beautiful copperplate and wash paintings of the island by Tutti, who was a painter and a sculptor. And there's also wonderful logbook from a man called Brunstrom, a man so laconic that he uses no adjectives in everyday speech. He's the guy who plays Eriksson in Tove Jansson's famous. He's basically Eriksson in the Summer Book. So this is not the island that the Summer Book is based on, but it was their kind of home and their refuge. It's a beautiful book. It's a beautifully made book.
Yes, it looks amazing.
Sort of have done it wonderfully. And it's just that thing, one evening I picked it up and I was transported to the Gulf of Finland, to the rocks and the sea and the sound of the sea. And she writes with such elegance. I'm just going to read a tiny little bit to give you the flavour. Also, I thought this would amuse you about it starts with about them not on their waiting to see if they can get planning permission to build. Mm. So this is back in the 60s. While we waited, we lived on Haru in a tent. It rained the whole time. Tutti read the Vicomte de Bragelonne, Volume 6. There's nothing like the classics, she said. Read Les Miserables, unabridged, and then you'll understand. You have to be loyal. Yeah, you like that, Andy. I know that Tutti is loyal to what she believes, even afterwards. We'd pitched our tent right next to the big boulder, which is so massive that it had become a landmark, at least for people who navigate by hearsay. The boulder is estimated to weigh about 50 tons. It lies in a huge frog pond at the only spot suitable for building a cabin that's out of the ocean's reach. It rained all week. The pond overflowed and trickled down the rock face right past our tent, and it smelled awful. We dreamed about what our new cabin would look like. The room would have 4 windows, 1 in each wall. Towards the southeast, we'd need to see the big storms that rage right across the island. On the east, we'd see the moon's reflection in the lagoon, and on the west side, a rock face with moss and polypody ferns. To the north, we'll keep watch for the approaching boats, so we'll have time to get ready. We figured that if we were going to build a cabin, it ought to be fairly high up on the slope, but not at the top, because that's only for the navigation marker, maybe just a little way down, so that from the Gulf and from the boats that rush past for no good reason, only the chimney is visible, in silhouette against the light. Late one evening, we heard a motor shut down at our beach, and someone with a flashlight came slowly up the slope. He introduced himself, Brunstrom from Krakow. Brunstrom was out salmon fishing and was going to spend the night on his boat. Then he saw a light on the island. We made tea on our Primus stove. Brunstrom is rather small. He has an austere, weather-beaten face and blue eyes. His gestures are quick but measured, and he uses no adjectives in everyday speech. His boat has no name. We trusted him immediately. Brunstrom told us we wouldn't need much time, although you never knew with the autumn weather. He'd bring Sjöblom and maybe Charlie and Helmer, and for starters, they'd have to blow up the big boulder. Brunstrom said that dynamiting and excavating for a cellar doesn't count as construction. Construction means framing, and framing won't last the winter without a roof. So we'd have to hurry. Before it snows, he said. And so it goes on. It's just, it's that simple, that lovely.
I'm always happy to read more Tove.
And it's I mean, if you love the pitch of her, there is a melancholy always that runs through her work, which is there through this, and it's very moving. Their farewell to the island and leaving it is beautifully done. But it's a small but I think really beautiful addition to the Tove Jansson canon, and hats off to Sort of for producing it so beautifully.
When you said you were reading this, it rang a bell with me, and I thought I could remember that Simon was a huge fan of Tove Jansson. Am I right?
You remember correctly, yeah. I think she's so wonderful. As you say, there's that melancholy, but it's always a complete lack of sentimentality to everything she writes. And
humour, she's funny. I mean, like the Moomin Trolls themselves, and her relationship with Tutti, which, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the film is an amazing film as well. The Tove film,
and Fair Play is the novel that's sort of based on them, isn't it? Which is another. Well, they're all wonderful. And she's been so lucky as well, posthumously, that Thomas Teal, I don't know if he's translated this one, but he's translated all the others, I think, and he's...
Yes, I should say that, translated by Thomas Teal.
I was looking to see if her American novel, Sun City, was coming back, because I think I read somewhere that it is, though it might not be Sort of that are doing it. I typed in Tove Jansson Sun City Twitter, and the first result that came up was Simon Thomas.
Well, there you go. Yes.
That's you.
It is me. It's one of those times when you think, gosh, there might be a neglected gem, and perhaps this is the best of her work, and it absolutely is the worst of her work. But
unfortunately, it is. Yes,
the rest of her work is still very good. But
fascinating, though. Fascinating. Well, we've done that now.
The main event.
The book chat will continue on the other side of this message.
The rural way of life is about making everyone feel at home. Tractor Supply chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform intelligent customer service. Together, we put the power of AI to work across 2,200 stores, keeping things running seamlessly inside, curbside, and countryside. This is elevated customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Oh my God, it's the coolest thing ever. Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? Well, check this out. It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. Seriously. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Right, John, where are we? We're in Bakersfield. Are we? I think we're in Bakersfield,
No,
in California.
I think we're in a ranch. We're a ranch somewhere between Putnam and Bakersfield, aren't we?
So Cassandra at the Wedding by Dorothy Baker. This was published in 1962, as John was saying earlier. This is the main book we're talking about today. Alexandra, you chose the book for us. Do you want to say where you first read it? Was it a Virago? It was a Virago modern classic.
It was, but I read it way before that. Literally, when I was a teenager in the 60s, must have been the late 60s, I tried to think, I must have been really young, actually, but my parents had the Penguin paperback of it. I remember it really clearly with a drawing of one Cassandra, I guess, in her white dress. And both my parents loved the book, and so I picked it up and I read it. And I can't have understood very much of what was in the book, but I loved it because it felt so incredibly sophisticated. I love the darkly glittering humour, and it felt very exotic to me. It wasn't like any book that I had ever read, and it stayed with me, and it's haunted me ever since then, literally ever since the late 1960s. So when I was at Virago, we did it, and it was Carmen who had decided to republish it. But of course, it was this old friend to me, and Georgina Hammack wrote this wonderful introduction to it and got to know, and as she told me recently, she got to know Howard Baker, Dorothy Baker's husband, as a result.
What is it that stayed with you? So you've talked about what it was then, but what is it that you keep coming back to?
Well, obviously then I think I didn't understand anything of what was going on sexually in the book when I read it as a teenager. And I read it simply as a book about sisters. And I am very interested in sisters, possibly because I don't have one. I'm a girl between two boys, which I've always really liked. I haven't wanted a sister particularly. I think of myself as the jam in the sandwich in my family. But I've always been really interested in sisters, and they are mysterious creatures to me. And there's something about very close sister bonds that is not like any other relationship in this world. And of course, this is more so. It's like it's squared a million times over because they're identical twins. But, in my publishing life, obviously Esther Freud, who I talked about earlier, Hideous, Kinky and Peerless Flats are both novels about sisters. Lucy Ellmann's wonderful first novel, Sweet Desserts, is about sisters, very much based on her sister relationship. And then, of course, I've spent much of the last 20 years watching a very close quarters the relationship between my stepdaughters, Clover and Nell. Yeah. And Clover Stroud has written, Nell died 2 years ago nearly, and Clover has written the most astonishing book about sisters I've really ever read, called The Red of My Blood, which is coming out next spring. And she writes about how they were as if they were sort of one flesh. And that the parting of them, the anguish that brings, the parting of them in real living life, not just in death, but how passionate their relationship was, but also how angry it could be, and how confused and how complicated. And I think it's these things that have always fascinated me.
And that is part of Cassandra at the Wedding, isn't it? The idea of the divided flesh. Yes. I'm sure we'll talk about that. Simon, when did you first discover this book or Dorothy Baker?
I read Young Men with a Horn first probably about 6 years ago, I think, just because I'd seen a book blogger write about it, and I happened to stumble across it. I then read a book called The Street by Dorothy Baker that I was halfway through when I discovered was a different Dorothy Baker and not a very good writer. I was thinking, she's really gone off the boil on this one. I'd bought Cassandra at the Wedding in a charity shop maybe 10 years ago on the basis that one always buys a Virago Modern Classic if one doesn't already own it. And it was when Daunt republished it, I thought, well, they have such impeccable taste in their choices that I should get my copy off the shelf and read it. And, well, like Alexandra, these years before, I was completely beguiled by it. I'd enjoyed Young Man with a Horn a lot, but this felt to me in a completely different league.
And would you like to reveal to the panel your particular connection to the book?
I'd love to. So one of the things I love looking out for are books about twins, because I am a twin. And I'm always very keen to see how other people do it. And the answer is often very badly. I'm an identical twin, although we only discovered that out 5 years ago. We were told, the doctors told our parents that we were non-identical, and we had a DNA test done just before our 30th birthday and discovered we were identical.
Wow.
Now looking at photos, I could have saved myself £200, I think. But one believes what one is told. And I think what a lot of novelists do when they are writing about twins, they're either they're exactly the same or they're exact opposites. And the thing that really annoys me is that they're often surprised that they look like each other, or surprised that they're twins. and it's not a daily surprise to me that I'm a twin. And the thing that Dorothy Baker does so well is that she's not imagining what it would be like to be a twin from the outside. She somehow completely gets under the skin of what it's like to be a twin. I assumed she was a twin when I was reading it, and it was only afterwards discovering that she was an only child I was very surprised. It's that thing of having your own identity and a dual identity, and those things coexisting for your whole life. It's truly wonderful how she manages to understand the glory and the tension of that relationship. Neither me nor my brother are married, so we haven't got to this point yet. But there's certainly been times in my life of leaving home I found extremely difficult for that reason. And she really captures, how it's both a wonderful bond, but also any bond is restricting in some ways. I don't know if it's too early to go into a passage, but maybe I could read the passage.
If you've got a bit of the book on being a twin, that would be wonderful.
I have. Granny looked sad. I've never been able to see anything wrong with your being... Don't say it, I said. Don't say that word. Nobody else who is one feels this way about it, Gran said, in the agreed voice she always uses for this particular conversation, the conversation about our condition, so to call it. I'm sorry to grieve her or deny her her pleasure, but I have to make things clear, because no one of my grandmother's temperament and sensibilities can understand what it's like to be bound to a way of life like ours, a situation we inwardly glory in, but one that we have to protect at every turn from the menacing mass of cliches that are thrust on us from the outside. To be like us isn't easy. It requires constant attention to detail. I've thought it out. We've thought it out together. I've tried to explain to my doctor that it's a question of working ceaselessly at being as different as possible, because there must be a gap before it can be bridged. And the bridge is the real project.
So that's actually such a great passage to choose, I think, Alexandra and Mitch, because you get the flavour of the narrative voice, and so much of the appeal of the book from the first couple of lines is the fully developed personality that's coming at you off the page.
And don't you think that the writing, it's so interesting that Dorothy Baker was obsessed with jazz. She was a woman of obsessions, and jazz was a very big obsession. But I think that the writing is like jazz. She riffs, the rhythm is incredible. She improvises. She's really bold in the way that she writes, and she sometimes have paragraphs where you almost can't take a breath in them. So for me, that prose is electrifying and stays with me.
I mean, technically, one of the things that just blew me away about this book, I mean, Cassandra's voice, which is most of the book, is I mean, that kind of wit, Parker-like, as you say, the riffing, the kind of the intelligence, but then to manage to go into the other twin, the duller, let's be honest, the duller of the two twins, and to make a duller consciousness not dull in the writing. I had to read Judith's bit twice just to reassure myself that it was of what she did. I think that is extraordinary. And then when you come back to Cassandra's voice, you have no idea what you're going to get, and what you get is I just think it's sublime. I think one of the most moving and powerful endings to a novel I've read in a long, long time.
We'll come on to the ending. I'd just like to state my credentials as an only child who's read this book 3 times. It had nothing to say to me as an only child, but what I found with it, when I knew we were going to be doing it, I was starting thinking, I've read this book twice already, which on one level is good because you've read it, so you kind of feel you're across it. But I thought I'd better read it again. Every time I read it, every time I've read it, it seems unfair to say it's leapt up every time. I thought it was very good the first time I read it. This time, third time through, I was thinking, God, this is a fantastic book. The consistency of the imagery within it, which you couldn't possibly see the first time you read it, but the stuff about the use of, to take such a potentially boring image as water and to make it work so hard all the way through the book in different contexts, this time really blew me away. I thought, wow, this is so tight and so careful, and yet, as you say, Alexandra, has all the breath of jazz in it at the same time, has all the energy and the rhythm, and it's absolutely first rate. It's not, sometimes we might say, well, neglected literature, neglected for a reason, but this I get the sense this book is better known in America, is that right, than it is in the UK?
It is, because she's American. But what I find really interesting is when I go to the Frankfurt Book Fair or the London Book Fair and I go through the lists of foreign publishers, of European publishers, so many of them have that book on their lists. So it's not just Britain and America. That book has an incredible sustained life across the world. And how is it that that's possible? It's been very quiet, but there are all these editors who love it, as much as I do. And that's been a great bond. They're my friendships with editors who love Cassandra at the Wedding. It's very simple. But I found reading it this time, what struck me that hadn't stayed with me so much is how incredibly sad the book is. I was devastated by it this time round, in a way that I hadn't been when I read it 2 or 3 times before.
And I think that's partly because everything that Cassandra does to try and preserve that relationship is so self-destructive, and she is conscious of it being self-destructive while she's doing it, but can't stop herself. So even those conversations where she says, "Oh, which wedding?" or "which man?" or something, where it's just going round and round in circles. And she seems to be trying to resurrect some sort of sisterly flippancy, but it's really just putting all these barriers back in place.
She's a brilliant self-editor, Cassandra. Painfully so. That she'll say something and then she'll reflect on what she said, and she'll go, "That was too strong," or "That landed. I'm quite pleased it landed."
Well, she's a writer. She's a writer, isn't she? Like her mother. And that's the other thing, is that their dead mother is there through the book. Through the book.
Yeah. I have to say, Alexandra, I thought of Nell and Clover all the way through.
Yes.
And also in that strange way that I think sometimes as a man, it's almost an envy that you have for that bond that sisters have. It's kind of it is of a different quality and a different intensity, and I think that I'm very close to my brother, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
Well, I'd also like to point out this will seem so basic if you haven't read the book, but I thought this was a stroke of genius. Cassandra's name begins with a C. All the other main characters' names begin with a J, right? Jude, Jack, Jane, James, and her ex-friend Liz Janko, right? They're all, it's such a tiny, simple thing to put her on the outside of everybody else. Because I kept thinking, wait a minute, Judith, Jane, is Jane the mum? Yeah, Jane's the mum. No, Jude's the sister. But Jack, is Jack or James the father? Or her sense of outsiderdom, her own sense of outsiderdom is represented by something as rudimentary but effective as that. And I thought that was what a bold thing to do, to just let lie there. The idea that her name, and all their names are pretty much like Cassandra, like 3 syllables. Jude, Jack, James, Jane, Liz. They're all single syllables. She doesn't fit in. It's so, you've got to be a really good writer to be brave enough to do that.
And to get away with it.
And to get away with it, exactly, yeah. This is a clip of the writer Peter Flannery, who you'll probably know best for writing Our Friends in the North. And he adapted Cassandra at the Wedding for Radio 4 about 5 years ago. And he hadn't read the book before. And what do you think of this?
It's a family, but it's a highly dysfunctional family, and it's set in California about 50 or 60 years ago. It feels very modern and yet very alien at the same time. And that's partly because the family is so quirky and unusual, and their concerns are so strange. But they're living at a time which it's history now, but it somehow doesn't feel like history. It's an odd mixture of new and old, and then and now. And I found it unputdownable. It's one of those books that I read from cover to cover straight away. The other thing about it is its tone. It's a very unusual piece of work. I mean, there's an attempted suicide in it, which makes it sound immediately like it's a piece of graphic, maybe even melodramatic drama. But it's not. It's very It's really quite unexpected, and it doesn't, in a way. Even when you get to that point, it's not entirely serious. It's treated in such an odd way. It's not done flippantly at all. I mean, you feel for the girl and what she's going through. But it's not a melodrama, and it's not a tragedy. It is not a tragedy. It ends actually not comically or even romantically, but it ends with a kind of growing up, I think, is what happens, and a moving on. She picks herself up and moves on.
Now, we are going to talk about two elements of this book which contain spoilers, so you might want to fast forward for the next 5 to 10 minutes. But if you are spoiler phobic. But we can't talk about the book without talking about these elements of it. The first of which is the suicide attempt that takes place in the book. What did you think, Alexandra, about what Peter Flannery said there about the tone of that event within the book?
I think that was very good. It's because you're in Cassandra's head when she's taking the pills, and she can't do anything without actually being funny and a bit flip about it, and dry as anything. And so you're kind of there with her in the bed when it's happening. So you're not at a distance, and you're almost living it with her, and you think, oh, I can do this. It makes you think about what it would be like to take those pills, actually.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think that's really accurate. There's a spontaneity to the way it is told to you, the reader, that it seems spontaneous.
And Baker's so good at that time and elsewhere at states of consciousness, I guess, whether it's getting more drunk or if it's waking up or if it is there as she's going into a coma, I guess. And I think the bit that really stood out for me there is where she's writing the suicide note, but she can only do it by tracing her finger on the sheet of the bed, and she's hoping that might somehow be readable later.
Did you get my note? She says, doesn't she, later?
Yeah.
Sean, I know you wanted to read a bit, didn't you, that's related to this?
This is, I think, one of the most convincing and beautiful accounts of what we would call a near-death experience. So I'll read it. So much for the passing in review. She's obviously been bits of her life have been passing by. It was quick, I think, a great deal of it, but soon finished. And then, though it's not simple or even sensible to try to reconstruct nothingness, I believe I almost achieved it for a while. A great stretch of purest black velvet, smooth, soundless, the very piece of black velvet I'd been looking for so long. I can remember feeling it drop, weightless over me, swathing and swaddling me and then becoming one with me, so that there was no way to tell which was velvet and which was Cassandra. But I never made it all the way to nowhere. There was a dogged spark of consciousness, very small, very feeble, but dogged, and it could just as well be called conscience, damn it, as consciousness, because I knew in some beating depth that I was engaged in illicit communion with the one great howling beauty of them all, and that there would have to be what there always has to be in this kind of affair: repercussions. There would be jealousy, accusations, recriminations, the full deck of threats and noises. I couldn't stay all night and have to leave by an inconspicuous exit and try not to kick anything over on the way out, and remember to pick up my things, my bag, my lipstick, all marks of identification, including the ostentatious monogrammed items my friends are forever giving me. Collect them and leave without lingering, because nobody will bless this union, Not even Granny, who will bless practically anything if you set it up right. No chance for me in the one of my choice. My calm, sweet, quiet, black velvet love. No receiving line. No friends to wish us all the happiness and success in the world in our new life, which, of course, is the wrong word. But how would they know enough to believe I could prefer the opposite number? It's just amazing, I think.
Wow.
Again, jazz, right?
Yeah.
You know, you can hear it as mournful, the mournful solo piece.
But still funny. She's still funny. She's still cracking jokes.
So Dorothy Baker's first novel was called Young Man with a Horn and was published in 1938 and is still thought of as being one of the great pieces of jazz writing based on the life of Bix Beiderbecke, the trumpeter Bix Beiderbecke. And it was made into a film in 1950 and starring Lauren Bacall, Doris Day and Kirk Douglas. And we've got a little bit from the trailer here just to give you a flavour of that. And then we'll talk about the relationship between the two books, I think.
Music. The kind you can't write, the kind you just gotta feel. He played it, and the world cheered at his feet. Listen. Its haunting beat is telling the whole story of his fight to rise above the past, of his climb from Dixieland jive joints to Broadway's starlit roofs, of the strange adventure that brought him into the lives of two different and exciting women, two dangerous and demanding loves.
Keep away, Richard. Better not take any chances with me. Only people who respect themselves can ever give love fully, freely. I don't happen to respect myself.
What are you trying to do, Rick? Kill yourself because you tried for something that didn't exist. That's what you've done all your life.
You cheap. What a dope I was. I thought you were class, like a real high note you hit once in a lifetime. That's because I couldn't understand what you were saying half the time. Well, you're like those carnival joints I used to work in. Big flash on the outside, but on the inside, nothing but filth.
Wow. Can I just say Young Man with a Horn is absolutely brilliant. The film and the book are both brilliant. Alexandra, you were saying that Cassandra in Cassandra at the Wedding is like a writer, and Rick, the protagonist of Young Man with a Horn, is a genius cornet player. It seems to me that Dorothy Baker has a really deep veneration, Simon, of the artist. That's the spiritual element of her work.
And that's, I mean, in Cassandra at the Wedding, made sort of very overt by this half-owned piano that represents, that's the soul of the two of them or something. And the idea that either would give it to the other is unbearable, even though it can only be in one place at a time. And I think she doesn't get, it's not as heavy-handed as making this metaphor, but it does feel a bit like the two sisters had been a harmony and then had to play solo, I guess. And Judith is, as John mentioned earlier, the duller of the two, but sort of the more measured, sort of background beat, keeping Cassandra's more sort of improvisation on the top of it, tethered to the ground, maybe. Yes, I think that's too fanciful. But I did feel when she switched voices to do this, you could see it was the same gene pool, but she was that much more restrained and that much more keeping in time, I guess, whilst Cassandra was more all over the place.
Perhaps the most, for me, devastating moment of the book is when Cassandra says to Judith, "You can have my half of the piano," and Judith says that Jack doesn't like music.
Yes. And how early did you know that? Almost immediately, yes.
And why, but could you expand on that, Alexandra? Why is that devastating, do you think?
I think it's devastating because I believe it means that actually that the marriage can't last, or if it lasts, Judith's soul will be squashed, and she, in a way, as an artist, won't survive. And it's interesting that Dorothy Baker as a child was a violinist, and she had polio and her hand was damaged, so she could never play it properly. But there must have been in her soul the a musician was in her soul as well. And I think she played the piano later on. But yeah, I just think that at the end of it, you think actually Cassandra is going to find her way into life. She will, despite all the difficulties. And Judith is the one in peril because her spirit is likely to be squashed.
You're so right about that. That there's a brilliant passage where Judith imagines that the only thing that would help Cassie, she says, would be for me to go to paces the same way she has. And she says, if right now there were nothing for me but blankness and despair, meaningless love, pleasureless drinking, no faith in anything except the decayed memory of us as a family, living in a fortress, being self-sufficient and superior, if it were that way for me, Cass would take over and get me out of it, bring me back, convince me, get me to the shore, turn me into a great musician, a whole-souled human being, a teetotal, anti-barbiturate true believer. She'd do it for me. I think, God, that's why that scene, why she can't stay at the wedding reception. I mean, you're right. This is supposed to be the happy denouement, but she can see it.
And I think what we haven't said is that Judith is the artist. I mean, she's an incredible pianist.
Yeah.
She's a real artist. Yes. So it's not giving up a hobby. It's giving up everything that she is. So it's horrific, that moment.
Mm. And it's not that he doesn't like it; it's that he doesn't seem to respect it, isn't it?
I had a look through the various contemporary reviews of this novel, and what's really striking about it is, I mean, you would expect some variation, but no two reviews in 1962, certainly in the UK, could agree about the book. It was published here by Gollancz. They're wildly different. You've got somebody in The Guardian, a reviewer in The Guardian, saying this is a perfect novel. Technically, on a technical level, I agree with Carson McCullers on the cover. It's perfect. But I thought I'd just read for you the review by Anthony Quinton in The Telegraph and ask you to respond to this.
I put it to you.
So this is from 1962 in a roundup, guys, of titles, including novels by Robin Jenkins, Cesare Pavese, Mary Bosanquet, and Dorothy Baker. In Cassandra at the Wedding, Dorothy Baker arranges a surprise for her readers, which somehow rebounds on herself.
It's a great start.
The book begins with a narration of one of a pair of handsome American twins in their young womanhood.
God.
Daughters of a deeply thoughtful philosophy professor who has retired from the world. i.e. a cowardly and pretentious drunk. This girl, the Cassandra of the title, is magnificently nasty, believing that the world has come to an end when the other less dominant and fascinating twin plans to marry a worthy young doctor. So, can I just say people are really laughing, but we can't see it. So this is a magnificently off review. Let's just spoilers, right?
My goodness.
So to foul things up, she stages a suicide attempt.
Yeah.
Stages, gosh.
When her pained, concerned sister takes over the narration, a shock is administered with the disowning of the original I figure. But while we are invited to deplore Cassandra's emotional cannibalism, we are still expected to regard her as somehow wonderful, and in particular to believe that she is entitled to her piteous intellectual snobbery. In fact, it is impossible to dissociate Cassandra's obscenely egocentric attitude to other people from the complacent, more cultured than thou preciosity for which the whole family stands.
Crikey.
Say what you really mean.
I would like to make the point, Alexandra, that every single review of this book, regardless of how good, bad, or horrible it was, like that one, is written by men in 1962.
Why does that surprise me?
Right.
The world before Virago.
Yeah, that's why we were founded.
Yeah, it's so true.
But it is true, isn't it? Like, there is a particular sensibility to, I don't even want to say novels like this, to certain novels, which the dear chap there at the Telegraph is simply not equipped to be able to deal with.
But I also think that this novel was way ahead of its time. One of the things when I read it was I was at that point reading British modern novels. I was reading Nell Dunn and Margaret Drabble and all those women that were publishing at the time and loving them. But this was something else. So the modernity of it, I think, was exceptional. And that's why it doesn't feel dated in any way at all. And in fact, later you have, Nora Ephron, and there's a particular sort of layer of smart, wisecracking women writers that come mainly out of America. But there's a novel that's so like this, it's extraordinary, which I adore, which is Miriam Tave's All My Puny Sorrows.
Oh, yeah. One of my 2 or 3 favourite novels of the last 20 years.
Isn't it incredible? And I was told to read it by Meg Rosoff, who said, you must read this book. And of course, Meg writes brilliantly about families. The Great Godden, her most recent one, I think is exceptional about that. But All My Puny Sorrows is about a pianist, about sisters, pianists, and one tries to kill herself. And that sort of crackle, that dancing prose comes out of Dorothy Baker. But I think Dorothy Baker was, obviously she does come out of Dorothy Parker. It's all Dorothys around here. It's friends of Dorothy. Literally, but there is a modernity that I think is completely new and sort of in 1962.
Yes, the similarity with All My Puny Sorrows is also a lot of the humour shouldn't work, which is why it's so funny.
Yes.
That the crackle that you describe is coming from somebody facing down bleak subject matter with absolute clear-eyed truth. That is what makes it funny. There's not gags. The gags aren't the thing. It's like the same with Cassandra's narration in Cassandra at the Wedding. Is the thing I was talking about, her self-editing. That's where a lot of the humour comes from. It's that apprehension of her own motives for saying what she's saying while being able to analyse them while she's doing it. And that seems very of a piece with All My Puny Sorrows.
There also seems almost to be humour in the plotting, and that the wedding is such an afterthought. It's there in the title, and then it just sort of happens in a few minutes when Cassandra's not even there, despite being Cassandra at the wedding.
That's really true. Yes, Cassandra at the wedding, but not at the reception.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the other way around.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Do you? I was just going to wonder. I just wondered why she didn't write more. There's an interesting review in the London Review suggesting that she was kind of plagued by feelings of inadequacy.
Yes.
She had many good reviews and she had commercial success, but
you feel though that Cassandra type, that's what you said at the beginning of the show, that she's a self-editor, an extreme self-editor. And like, she wanted to be the best. And it's there's a really telling quote. She was asked in an interview, they said, why do you have to be a writer? The interviewer asked. She said, well, maybe I don't, Baker said. That's what I'm hoping. That's every writer knows that feeling.
But also as a writer, presumably she has a crush on genius. That's one of the themes we were talking about earlier. And perhaps if you're a writer and you're saying, well, I'm a trumpet player, but am I Miles Davis? Am I Bix Beiderbecke? If I'm not those people, then why am I bothering? Has anyone here read Trio?
No. No.
So she wrote 4 novels, and that's the second, and seems perplexingly unavailable.
It does sound from the accounts that it is rather disappointing as a novel.
Yeah.
But who knows? I think
lesbian pulp is one of the things I...
Oh, wow.
Yes, absolutely. But I think we should all hunt it down and share it and see what we think of it, because it would be very interesting. It's interesting looking at the Wikipedia entry on her. Is they're obsessed with the lesbian aspects of her writing and herself. And you just think, honey, get over this. And somewhere, I think it might be in that they make out that actually Cassandra is sexually obsessed with her sister, which I think is completely wrong. Completely wrong.
I didn't agree with that. Yeah, I didn't agree with
This
that.
is one of the things I often find whilst reading books about twins, is they turn into twincest. And I was worried starting this one because she's obsessed with her for sure, but it's not. I don't think it's sexual obsession.
Not at all. Yes, yes. I mean, I want us to see the sisters together. So I'm going to read a bit about that. So Cassandra's been drinking all night along with her dad.
It's a great drinking novel as well, can I just say?
Very
It's
good
brilliant.
at drinking. I mean, the descriptions of drinking are exquisite. And at this point, she's in the garden and she's on a bench, and then she wants to look at the stars, which are very important to her. And then she climbs up on the table. And I have to admit that when I drink, which of course is scarcely ever, I am given to getting up on chairs and tables. There's something about the height that it gives you. So I'm really with Cassandra here. So she's standing on the table, and Judith returns. "What are you doing up on the table?" my sister said. I hadn't heard her come out of the house. I turned around and looked down, and there she was in her bikini, holding a hairbrush. "Nothing special," I said. "Well, I'm not getting up there and brush your hair." "You're not?" I said, as if it was the one thing I'd counted on. But I got right down and sat on the bench, and Jude got up and sat on the table above me at my back and started brushing. She was using a brush of Jane's, Jane is their mother, with long, stiff whalebone bristles. At first I thought she was sculpting me, but it was a very effective brush, and after a few tearing jerks, it was getting through and pulling away quite smoothly and pleasantly. I was glad I hadn't yelled, because I was now wanting this to go on as long as might be. 2 hours, 3 weeks, forever. Just go on brushing and keep on brushing off what's coming. I don't know how long it went on, the whaleboning, nor exactly when it stopped, and Judith got off the table and put down the brush and sat down beside me on the bench. We'd have to do it now, I supposed. Ask the natural questions. When's the wedding? What's he like? Do you have an apartment? And get the proper answers to the natural questions. But we didn't. For a while there we were, quiet, perfectly quiet. The frogs weren't, and the crickets weren't, but we were. We've sat quiet a lot in our time, and it was that way again. We could have been 11 years old, or 7, all at ease with our house behind us and the river bottom down there, and everything together with itself. It was the way it should be, and I stopped worrying and let myself be grateful at last to Judith for fixing it. How had she done it? How had she managed to get it to be this way, just us, when I'd been expecting to come back home as an outsider and have to meet entrenched invaders? I wanted to thank her, but it wouldn't have sounded right, so I didn't try, just relaxed and took a long swallow of my drink and went back to being 11 years old and 7 and 13, all the ages we've ever been. A lot of days gave their lives to get us all the way to 24, and I sat here now and felt intimately the accumulation of 2 times 24, which is 48, taking us together a double 24 years of facing responsibilities, learning to walk and talk, then read and write, button up and unbutton, put on, take off, drive, dive, swim, judge, jeer, and worry. The world's gift of learning.
I don't think the Telegraph reviewer really caught this book.
Beautiful.
Could we, before we go, can we just, again, slight spoiler alert, I'd just like to talk about the end of the book, which Peter Flannery was saying, is about her, Cassandra, moving on. I find that last page, every time I've read it a few times, because it does that amazing thing that literature does of meaning one thing and everything, and I'm not quite sure what it is, but yet it's incredibly fulfilling and satisfying. What is the outcome for Cassandra at the end of the novel? You know, Alexandra, you were saying you feel the outcome for Judith is potentially disastrous. What is the outcome for Cassandra?
I think the outcome for Cassandra is that she will find a way of taking her life into her own hands, and it will never be an easy life, but I think she will become a writer. And a lot of the fact that she's unable to write is to do with the fact that her mother was a writer and her mother has died. And there's an amazing line in this, which is, I could never write any of this until I could tear up the pawn ticket on the ghost of my mother.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Magnificent. Yeah. Yeah. Simon, what do you think? Do you think it's a hopeful conclusion?
I think I'm a little more ambivalent. I think perhaps because that sock never quite reaches the water in that last line, and it seems this. Cassandra's almost doing something, or almost plunging into something else, almost dying, and I get the sense that she will almost achieve things for a very long time, and maybe just a sort of decades of suspended animation or something. She doesn't seem to me to have the quality to be able to reach fulfillment. But I hope for her sake that's not the case.
I'm going to read that last paragraph. So again, if you're still listening, you might want to skip. I'm just going to read that last paragraph as a way of bringing us to the conclusion. Because for me, I find this incredibly moving. And yet, if you were to ask me why, like all great art, I probably can't tell you. And all I can say is like the idea about doing these brave things, this is sort of ludicrous. The imagery is kind of ridiculous. The twins, the socks, the water, and yet it's got that inevitability that great literature has, that you read it and you think, of course, that's how it has to end. Couldn't have, there's no other way it could end. It had to end like this. So here it is. This is the final paragraph of Cassandra at the Wedding. I was wearing loafers and socks, and on the way back I was walking faster, and one of my socks kept crawling down behind my heel. I stopped and pulled it up 2 or 3 times, and finally I slipped the shoe off and dropped the sock over the side and stood where I was and watched it go. Or tried to. It took immense concentration to stay with it. When I thought I'd lost it for good, the wind caught it far down, and I saw it flash in the sunlight once and again, and maybe even a 3rd time. But after that, I don't know. It was out of sight a long time before it could have hit the water. Oh, it's Gatsby good.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's superb.
It is. It's a great ending to an novel.
And brave, as you say, yeah.
Well, that's all we have time for. Huge thanks to Simon and Alexandra for this excuse to lounge by the pool and listen to a family tearing itself apart. To Nikki Birch for weaving our 4-part harmonies into a single piece of music, and to Unbound for all the brandy and sodas.
Special thanks to them. You can download all previous episodes of Backlisted, plus follow links, clips and suggestions for further reading by visiting our website, backlisted.fm. And we're always pleased if you contact us on Twitter and Facebook, and now in sound and pictures on Instagram too.
You can also show your love directly by supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/backlisted. We aim to survive without paid-for advertising. Your generosity helps us do that. All patrons get to hear Backlisted episodes early. And for the fraction of a price of a new silk dress from Saks, lot listeners get 2 extra lot listeds a month. Our 3-way poolside conversation about the books, films and music that have illuminated our week like autumn sun on leaves.
Lot listeners also get to hear their names read out on the show as a mark of our thanks and appreciation. And this week's batch roll call is Catherine McKinney, Rob Christopherson, Helen Hawken, Sarah Lopez, Stephanie Klassen. Thank you all.
Tom Hurst, Hannah Gray, Bridget Rogers, James, Steve Wilson.
Simon, is there anything you would like to add that we haven't covered about Cassandra at the Wedding or Dorothy Baker?
Just that it has a twins mark of approval. If you're looking to read twinlets, this is the one to go for. The best one.
More than The Shining.
I should confess, I've never read The Shining. Perhaps that will displace it.
Alexandra, anything you would like to add before we say goodbye?
Nothing but read it. What a book.
So true.
Simon and Alexandra will be here next time as not as the guests on this. They're taking over from me and Mitch because they're so brilliant. Thank you both. Thank you so much for coming in.
Amazing.
Thank you.
And listen, we're going to leave you with a piece of music by Bix Beiderbecke, which seemed appropriate to Cassandra at the wedding. Bix on Cornet from 1928. Frankie Trumbauer and his orchestra playing Bless You Sister. See you next time.
Bye. If you prefer to listen to Backlisted without adverts, you can sign up to our Patreon. It's www.patreon.com/backlisted. As well as getting the show early, you get a whole 2 extra episodes of what we call Locklisted, which is Andy, me, and Nikki talking about the books, music, and films we've enjoyed in the previous fortnight.